Good afternoon, and welcome to episode number 28 of At Your Service with Haber and Martinez. As you can see, Martinez is not here yet. He should approach at some point, but for the time being, it's just me and our special guest, Osky Serbin. You can see Osky over to one side of the screen. He's obviously the much better looking younger gentleman, although
I
he
don't
is
say that.
very appropriately dressed. I mean, I feel like I'm in good company in terms of the dress. Let me tell you a little bit about Osky and why he's here. Osky is in his second year of law school at the University of Miami, and he reached out to me to talk a little bit about some pointers in regards to his potential future career choice of potentially maybe going into criminal law. And we got to talking, and our conversation was so interesting and so free-flowing that I thought this would be a great topic for our audience to hear and maybe chime in on if you guys have any questions. So what the topic basically is, I've entitled episode 28, The Transfiguration from Law Student to Lawyer. And so, there's Martinez. Welcome. I'm still doing my monologue, Ed, so give me a second.
Oh, God. Can I tune back out?
Like you ever tuned in. So, yeah, that's it. Nice. Come on in and interrupt the flow, jackass.
Doesn't look like he's in a
jackass.
car
So,
Jackass.
anyhow, Osky is a second-year law student at UM. He grew up here in the 305. He graduated from Gulliver and went off to Bentley University in Waltham, Massachusetts. He got a Bachelor of Science in a topic called Creative Industries, and then started attending UM Law School. He also played football. He was quarterback with his team at Bentley. Anyhow, at UM, Osky is involved in the school's entertainment, arts, and sports law honor program. And he is also the treasurer of something that I hope we spend a good deal of time talking about today, because it's equally applicable to law students and lawyers as it is to anybody else in society. And that is the Mental Health Collective, which connects law students and administrators with faculty members to discuss issues and plan events surrounding mental wellness. So Osky is really a well-rounded, interesting, and intelligent young man. We're privileged to have him on board. I don't know what form of masochism has motivated him to go to law school and contemplate a career in criminal law, but, hey, to each their own. If that's what he wants and it makes him happy, I welcome.
At least he graduated from a tremendous, amazing law school. So
Yeah, and he's in his second year.
We're getting there though.
Don't jump the shark, Martinez.
You don't have to guess what school I went to. But
well, I went to Harvard in the South, so you can keep that. It is all about the U. Hopefully they'll have a better year at football this year. Let's jump into the kind of meat and potatoes of what we wanted to talk about. I guess we could start right there. Osky, what is this masochistic streak of yours? Why are you in law school right now? Why did you decide to go through 3 years of hell to have a lifetime of it?
So I guess I just want to preface with this is just my anecdote, my personal experience story. So if anyone else in my class might have had a different kind of thinking process or whatever, but for me,
Jesus Christ, the kid's already a lawyer with the disclaimers.
Yeah, right. No, but for me, it was just I was at Bentley, and Bentley's known for being a business school. So really, regardless of any degree I pursued at Bentley, I would be required to take these underlying business classes like accounting and marketing and management, operations, all that good stuff. So I figured, I'll do this fairly new creative industries degree, which I took web design and different classes like that. I had a class for writing papers about horror and sci-fi films and things like that. So it was definitely fun for me as kind of artistic person. And I already knew how to use Photoshop. So if I had assignments for class, I would just kind of wing it and do fine. So it was pretty minimal effort for me to get that degree. And I also had the business classes.
So if I'm reading you right, what you're saying, you figured this is an easy way to get a high GPA in your major.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah. So, but also it was classes I could tolerate. I mean, I also did I did a minor in law, so that's not just trying to get a high GPA. But that's kind of what interested me. In
he's got some integrity. He's got a little, but listen,
yeah,
before
I got some.
I took
American legal
psychology.
history last year and got a B while pulling an
I'm
all-nighter.
not trying to, I just want you to know, I'm not judging you. I'm not picking on you. I make no bones about it. I took every single legal psychology course I could take as an elective at FIU because I took the first one and it was the easiest A I ever made. And I figured, oh, baby, here's how I'm going to boost my GPA. Psychology all the way. At least at FIU at the time. I'm not saying today, I don't know, but it was super easy to get an A in psychology when I was at FIU. So I took psychology courses.
Yeah, my girlfriend
makes you smart.
in the PsyD program
right?
at Nova.
You got to
So
figure a
hopefully
way
she
to.
doesn't.
What do you call? Is that called jump? Is that called jumping the shark? Is that what that's called?
You've been jumping
Figuring
the
out
shark
the right
forever,
way to get what you
Martinez.
need.
That's what you do. Let the kid talk, Martinez.
But anyways, so when I was graduate, in my senior year, I just kind of figured like, all right, what's next? I don't want to go into really at the time at least, I didn't want to do like an advertising job or work for like a marketing firm because that's kind of what I would be prepared to do. Because I also did some stuff with like the hockey team at Bentley, which they're D1. So I was working on like their arena with the Jumbotron stuff. And so I definitely like have the skills for that kind of thing, but I guess I didn't want to necessarily do that. And just was like, oh, I guess law school would be good. And I wanted to come back to Miami anyways. So I figured that would be a good way to come back and just not really have to like throw my rest of my life away yet.
Well, the truth is, I think Ed would probably agree with me.
Oh, wow.
There's nothing wrong with having a law degree, whether you ever practice a day of law in your life. There are certainly benefits to that law degree that can help you in business and other areas and other aspects of life. So if you choose to practice law, like I said, you've obviously got a masochistic streak, and that's okay because, Martinez and I have that same nasty little virus, apparently.
Yeah, and I think now that I've kind of been through it for like a year or two, I'm realizing like I kind of need that as well, or else like you don't feel challenged. I mean, I don't know if you guys could speak to that, but like for me in undergrad, I didn't really necessarily feel challenged. Like I could knock out a paper in like a night if I wanted to and not really study for finals until the night before. But law school has definitely been a different animal with that.
Right.
Why don't you share a little bit about that with the folks? Tell them what it's like to be in law school. What are you going through?
Yeah, so it's been weird with Zoom. I would say like with Zoom school because my first year was last year, so everything was online pretty much.
You didn't have any live classes?
So they made it optional where there was like the ability to only take online classes. You could only do and then if you didn't want to do that, which I didn't want to do that, for the first year at least, they called it like hybrid. So it'd be like maybe 2 days of the week you'd have to show up on campus for a class, and then like the other half of the class would be on Zoom the other day of the week, something like that.
I don't know what it's weird. I don't know what it's like to have hybrid classes other than being a parent of a high school kid and watching what he went through a little bit over the last period of time, so I can extrapolate a little from that. But I don't know about how Ed feels, but I know for certain that in law school in particular, but even in college, my in-class experience was far more important than my out-of-class activity. In other words, I mean, you could give me a book and I could read it and I could study it, but if I had a good professor, I was going to learn an awful lot more in the classroom than I would, any other way. And I have to assume that to some degree or another, there's got to be some loss in translation between doing this virtually as opposed to physically being there.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's kind of a mixed bag when it comes to that because on one hand, I'll have some professors that are just lecturing, and like whether that's in person or on Zoom, like just for me, I can't follow along if you're just reading off the PowerPoint because in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, I know you're going to upload this. And like, even though I'm probably not going to read it later anyways, like it's just there. So there's no like, yeah. But then on the other hand, like some professors, even for online classes specifically, were more creative in their materials that they would use. So like for my first semester, I really liked my civil procedure teacher. I'll shout her out, Michelle DeStefano. she like would always have these creative videos. Like she would kind of do parodies of like popular songs that we would know and relate them back to different like otherwise probably really boring concepts.
So let me
So
cut you there for a second and just say to you that in my experience, those were always the best professors.
Yeah.
Creative ones that engaged with the class and got you to want to participate. Those were the ones that always stood out. And that translates, hopefully it will for you as it did for myself, and I know for Ed, because we've talked about this, it translates into how you practice law. Because ultimately you become a teacher. If you're going to be a litigator, if you're going to be a criminal defense attorney, and let me just run to a quick aside here. The reason that Martinez is in a suit and tie is because he was supposed to pick a jury today. I'm sure he'll explain to us the why of why he is not in a courtroom doing that at some point during the course of our show. But my point being, when Ed is in that courtroom today wearing that suit and tie, he may as well be a law school professor because he's there to educate a jury. He's there to take that jury from where they start and move them to where he wants them to go, to understand the concepts that he wants to relay. And he's got to figure out the best way to express that to that jury without turning them off, upsetting them, making them uncomfortable. Or maybe that's part of the strategy. Maybe he does want to make them a little bit uncomfortable. The point is, he's got to choreograph that presentation the same way that a law school professor has got to choreograph the way that their class is going to flow.
I got news for you, Mike. You and I both do it out, not just when we pick a jury. You got to do it when you talk to the prosecutor, when you're trying to get a plea, when you're trying to discuss what is evidence that can come in and what can't come in. All that good. Once you get through law school, in my opinion, going through law school so you can learn the rules of the game. You played football. You know the rules of the game, right? That's the basics. That's what you're getting in law school. But if I told somebody that it's 10 yards to get a first down, you get 3 shots, and if you get 4, but if you miss on 4, they get the ball right there, or you can punt it and push them back. And I give them all the rules. They still don't know what calls, what plays to call against what defense, and what to do, and what if they change up the defense, and what if they look like they're playing man, and then they switch it to zone after you step. All that you can't teach, and all that has nothing to do with the rules of football. So what we do when we negotiate, when we talk to a prosecutor, when we're picking a jury, all of that goes beyond just the rules. The rules are there so we won't get penalized, so the judge, so we know what evidence we can bring in and what we can't. So when we're prepping, just like when you're prepping for a game plan, right? You say, well, these guys are really tough and they're strong against the run. Well, you need to know that there's 10 yards. You need 10 yards to get a first down. So you realize, shit, these guys, I can only get 2 yards at a time when I'm running the ball. We better figure out how we're going to throw the ball against these guys. Same thing goes when I talk to a prosecutor. I need to know, I know the rules, but I'm like, okay, shit, how do I get a first down when they've got this evidence? Oh, I got to try and point out something else. I got to try and point out the flaws. And it's all part of teaching and getting them to put their guard down. And I don't mind sharing this with everybody. I hope everybody's listening. It's important when you deal with
Sorry, Ed.
No trade secrets.
Get people to put their guards down. And that's what these professors are doing when they interact with you with all these fun things. They realize, whoever this professor is, I'm sure she realizes students are a little bit intimidated. They're scared to say something and be wrong. How do you get them to say something?
I think that's what's even more difficult about classes online, because when you're on Zoom and the professor's looking for someone to call out, like answer a question or whatever, like the second you speak or get called on, your face is in front of the whole class as like the main focus. So instead of just being in the big room with like 50 kids or 100 kids and you're just in the corner, like you're the main focus.
And a good professor
will do it.
They want to make you feel comfortable. It's not about manipulating. It's not about lying. It's simply about letting you know, hey, it's okay to be open and honest with me. It's safe. Nothing's going to leave here. Nobody's going to judge you. Nobody's going to think anything. And I do the same thing when I talk to prosecutors. I do the same when I speak to a jury. Hey, everything's okay. You can be free to tell me what you want.
So those professors, they vary. They're on a continuum from crap to amazing and anything in between. Right. I mean, I had professors who in large classes, when they called on you, you had to stand up. You were literally under a spotlight. You were told right up front, when your name is called, you need to stand. And it was an intimidation thing for sure, because they were looking to catch the unprepared student. That was the goal of that professor. They wanted a case summary. They had assigned cases for you to brief. I don't know how they do it these days, but back when I was in law school, there was no Westlaw. We didn't have computers. It was all done by book, and it was all done by paper, which meant, we had to dig through shit in the library, page after page, and then we had to go to the photocopier, and God willing it had toner, and God willing it had paper. I mean, it was a complete nightmare, but that's what you had to do back then. So they would assign, 10, 20 cases a night for us to brief. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I took my briefing responsibilities very seriously. And I drafted them up, and I was prepared, because I never wanted to be that guy like some people who I saw that got called on, stood up and, were like, had nothing to say. They didn't know where they were going. Apropos of that, I will tell you that you will learn a lot in law school that is completely irrelevant to the. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I think I realized that in my contracts class when we were like learning about, we're reading some case, and then I was like, why would the holding come out this way? I don't remember what the case was about, but then afterwards we like learned about the UCC, and then I looked back at the case and it was from like 1870 something, like 5 years before the UCC was created. So I'm like, why are we even learning this?
They love to do that to you.
Is this?
Well, history is.
Wait a minute. I got a question, Mike. Wait, I have a question. Was this in elements?
No, it was in contracts. We actually didn't even take elements. They waived it for us, I think. Because of COVID stuff, because of Zoom on our first semester.
That was the stupidest class. There's only 2 law schools at the time when I was at UM that did it. University of Chicago, and all the professors that got their law degree from University of Chicago that were teaching at UM. But here's what I will share with you, my friend. See, Mike, like you, I took my briefing seriously in the first year.
Yeah.
I realized almost towards the end of my first year, let me tell you something, my friend. You know what law school is all about? It's about making sure that you can take an emotional beating. You're never going to be right. You're not going to be right. The sooner you realize that no matter what you say, your professor is going to take the opposite side, and he's going to tell you you're wrong, the sooner you realize, oh, this is about not being scared. This is about not being able to be intimidated. That's why they want to intimidate you. They're trying to make you strong. They're trying to make you tough. So when a judge busts your balls at the podium, you don't crumble. You stay strong.
I'm going to give you another take of what I think law school is all about. I think law school is a 3-year exercise in academic bulimia. I think you're required to eat as much information as they can possibly cram down your throat until you vomit it up on an exam. And then you're allowed to forget it. It doesn't really become relevant again until you take the bar, where you do the exact same thing. You cram as much information.
And then after the bar, not relevant.
Right. And then after the bar, you get into the practice of law and you have to unlearn everything. Well, it's not really true. You don't really unlearn everything, but you have to learn a whole new skill set as to how to be a lawyer. They don't teach you how to be a lawyer in law school. Now they can. And if you want to be a litigator, you take all of the litigation courses that you possibly can, the moot court stuff, get involved in as much of it as you can. But more importantly, the best hands down thing you can do, I got a buck. If Martinez disagrees with me, I got a buck for him right now. The hands down best thing you can do is get a certified legal internship with either the state attorney's office or the public defender's office. I don't care which one.
I did.
I
think I was a CLI.
Oh, I did it too. But I'm just saying that gives you a actual education in the trenches of what it's like to be a criminal litigator. You will actually know and have a real good foundation of knowledge to decide whether or not that's the area that's cut out for you.
Absolutely. But I think it'll be cut out for you. I'll tell you why I think criminal is good for you and you'll be cut out for it. Criminal is, and I'm no disrespect to anybody else. I can explain it. I'm not being judgmental just because I'm in it. But criminal lawyers are the show. We're the show. We're the rock stars. We're the quarterbacks. We're the ones that everybody wants to see. And the proof of that is, how many fucking movies do you see of civil lawyers? How many courtroom dramas do you see? Right? Why?
So that actually leads perfectly into a question I had. So I know, Mike, you intern with the state attorney's office. And I was going to ask if like maybe that internship specifically, or was there like a class you took in law school, maybe not, that you kind of had this moment of like, oh, like I think I want to do this, or I know I could do criminal law?
For me, I knew I wanted to be a criminal lawyer before I ever went to law school. That was the plan. You know, I had a battle as a young man coming out of high school, whether or not I even wanted to go to college, much less law school. It was borderline whether I was going to go into law enforcement or go into the law. And obviously, I took the second choice, which now 30 years in practice later, I'm second guessing and thinking, God damn, why didn't I just go to the police academy out of high school? I'd be retired right now and so happy. But on the flip side of the coin, knowing me, I also might have been indicted. So, you know, maybe I did make the right choice in hindsight. But see, I knew. Not everybody knows, but this is another excellent reason for you to consider a internship, because after that internship, you will know. And I'll give you a quick anecdote, just as a funny story. So when I interned in the state attorney's office,
isn't that what an anecdote is?
Yeah, I'm defining a term with a term.
Or you just want to be redundant? Okay, go ahead.
Redundancy, Martinez, we've been through this. I get paid by the word, so you know I'm allowed to be redundant. I did my internship at the state attorney's office here in Dade County in the late '80s, and at that time, Janet Reno was the state attorney. Janet was no nonsense. She was a incredible leader and just an unbelievable attorney with an incredible moral compass. She really was an amazing woman. In any event, my intern class, I don't remember how many of us there were, maybe 25 or 30 of us. We had a training assistant state attorney who was responsible for kind of keeping us in check. We were assigned to individual prosecutors to work with, but the overall supervisor of all the CLIs was one of the senior attorneys in the office at that time. I'll leave his name out of it. So one of the things that he told us when we started this internship was how stressful the job of a prosecutor is, how overwhelming it can be, the massive responsibility, the emotional roller coaster that you can go on, the pressures of being pulled, you know, by both sides of the equation, and, you know, not kowtowing to anybody, but doing what's ethical and what's right. And telling you that one of the best ways to cope with this is to have some hobby or some check valve or release mechanism where you can purge the stress, whatever it is, you know, just something that you enjoy. It could be music. In your case, you're a musician. It could be playing guitar or being in a band, or, you know, maybe playing with Photoshop, whatever it is. So one day we're in the office. Now, back at that time, the state attorney's office did not have its own building like it does now. It was on the 6th floor of the courthouse. It was the entire 6th floor was the state attorney's office. So we were on a break doing whatever, and one of the other interns and I, another kid who I went to law school with at the time, took a Nerf football out of somebody's office. And so we were just tossing it to each other in the hallway. Well, around the corner comes Janet Reno. She doesn't pause. She doesn't stop. She doesn't miss a beat. She keeps going, but she does turn her head and eyeball us both as she walks by, like kind of in silent disbelief that we are sitting in the middle of the state attorney's office throwing a football around. It didn't take too long before our training attorney called us into his office and said, "What the f is wrong with you guys? What are you doing? Janet Reno just came into my office to tell me you guys are playing football in the office." So we're like, "Dude, you told us to find a way to release stress." He's like, "Yeah, but I didn't tell you to throw a football in the state attorney's office." So that was one of my interesting anecdotes over there. Joking aside, again, what an incredible experience as a law student to stand in front of a podium, to call calendar, to have to field challenges in the moment. It's really, it's amazing. And you'd be surprised how many actual attorneys have a problem doing it, much less law students. Now, Ed was a prosecutor. Ed was a prosecutor for several years.
I was a prosecutor for almost 6. Criminal defense attorneys that I've seen literally their hands, palms sweating before a jury even walks in, before we can even pick a jury. It's really, it is, and I don't blame them. Trust me, it is a nerve-wracking situation. I'm sure similar to the time you went out to play quarterback in front of a big crowd. You've played it, done it. You've gone to law school. You've done all these things. But man, when those house lights come on and you're like, holy shit, this is real. This is real. And the way I perform today is going to be in the paper tomorrow. Holy shit. It gets real fast. And I'll give you a quick anecdote as well. So I was a CLI. And I was similar to Michael. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't go to college until I was 27. I graduated high school at 18, and I didn't go to college till I was 27 because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was kind of reluctant because I grew up in a bad neighborhood. And while I did know there were some really good cops, I also know there were a bunch of piece of shit cops. And I wanted to be a cop. Eventually I said, you know what? I'm tired of seeing innocent victims being hurt. And I thought, but I don't want to be just a regular street cop. I think I want to be an FBI agent. And then I realized you need a college degree to be an FBI agent. So I went to college to be an FBI agent. But along the way, you know, I was like, hey, if I can be a lawyer, maybe I should be a lawyer. I don't know. So once I got to law school, I knew I wanted to be a prosecutor. I knew that. So I became a CLI. So I become a CLI. I'm in county court. First day I'm in the courtroom. Oh my God, Barnaby. Remember Barnaby Min? Remember him, Michael?
Yep.
Barnaby Min was my prosecutor in the courtroom. Great guy. But man, he's such an asshole. And I mean that with all the love I can tell you. He's such an asshole. So I don't know how this works. And he tells me to go in the back and prep a stack like this, like 50 cases for trial. While we're sitting in court, I'm in the jury room prepping them. And I'm like, oh, okay, I don't know. I guess it's busy work. So I'm prepped through like 4 of them. When he comes in about an hour later and goes, let's go. You ready? Ready for what? He goes, let's go. Trying a case. A bench trial. It was in front of a judge. He's like, let's go. We're trying a case. I'm like, okay, you want me to tell you? No, don't tell me. You're trying to. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, so I told you the problem. Go ahead, you're trying to. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, yeah, come on. So I get out there, I try the first case, and I'm like, okay, I got this. Cop gets up there. It's one cop. It was a trespass or some bullshit case. And I'm reading from the A form. I'm like, okay, I got it. I got the arrest form. I got it. I'm just going to follow along. And then what happened? And then what happened? And then what happened? And he gets to the critical part, and he says something completely fucking different than what's on the A form. And I'm like, what the hell? What the hell? So I'm like, Judge, 1 minute. And I called Barnaby. I said, Barnaby, come here. He says, what? I said, this guy just testified to the exact opposite of what's on his A form. What do I do? You know what he said to me, Mike? He whispers in my ear, you're fucked. And he walks away. Really? That's the advice. Oh, fuck.
Well, you know, let me tack on to that.
I didn't know what to do.
Let me tack on to that and say this.
Sorry, I'm getting interrupted.
What? I'm sorry. What you
I'm
say?
getting interrupted. They're kicking me in the top. Where do I go? You guys keep talking.
Okay, thanks. So let me tack on to that and say, I take nothing away from prosecutors. I have, you know, many prosecutor friends. I have a great deal of respect for the job. Obviously, some are better than others, and some take their responsibilities as ministers of justice more seriously than others who consider themselves little robots of the office without any, you know, autonomy. But that said, I think if you're picking sides, and I recognize that this may be biased because I'm not a prosecutor and I've been a defense attorney my whole career, but I believe that it is far more difficult to represent the defendant than it is to represent the state. With the state, you're given a case. The cops do their job. They hand you everything. You've got what you've got. Very rarely is there anything more for you to do. Sometimes there is, but rarely. And whether you win or lose, it's irrelevant because it makes no difference to your life, or, you know, it does affect victims to some extent, but it really doesn't affect lives the way that it does on the defense side. So on the defense side, you're representing somebody very real and very alive whose life is in your hands, whose liberty is in your hands, whose, whether or not they're going to go home and see their parents or their spouses or their children or their relatives is in your hands. Whether or not they're going to be able to go back to work or have to forfeit their pensions is in your hands. Whether or not they're going to wake up in a jail cell for a day or a week or a month or a year or a decade or a lifetime is in your hands. And therefore, you have to do an awful lot more. You have a lot of pressure on you to try and come out on top. And it also requires a great deal of creativity because, again, unlike a state attorney who's given the case that they're given, and this is not to say that they don't have any strategy or brain work or, things that they need to do to build a case. Of course they do, but it's different than on the defense side. So I think, my experience anyhow is any jury trial, no matter which side of the fence you're on, is a very nerve-wracking experience for everybody. But the person who's really, really got their pants in the hot seat is the defense lawyer.
Well, let me give you from a prosecutor standpoint. You're right with certain prosecutors, and I'll point that out. There's a thing called the pit prosecutor. The pit prosecutor is the one that's in front of the same judge every day. He's in that courtroom every day. That's what he does. Most cases are handed to him. He's in the pits, and he generally gets what we call probable cause cases where the cop made a decision to arrest based on probable cause. I went to a specialized unit almost immediately. I was only in the office for about a year, 2 years, and I went into narcotics. When you're in a special unit, you now run the case. You are the one that controls the case for the most part. The cops call you. They tell you they got a lead. They tell you they got a target. How are we going to do it? What do you want them to do? You tell them what to do. You tell them to get subpoenas. You tell them to get arrest warrants. You tell them to get search warrants. You tell them to put a tracking device in the car. You control the investigation. And one of the reasons that I bring this up is I always tell young prosecutors, it makes you a much better defense attorney. Because one way you get what the cops show you, what they hand you, and sometimes you have to guess whether they're lying. It's not like a cop is going to come in and tell a pit prosecutor, oh, yeah, I lied. They don't. But when you get into a special unit, you really get into the nitty-gritty details of cases, and you start understanding the entire process of the law enforcement from each department, how they work, what they do, what autonomy do they have, what are standard operating procedures, what are unwritten rules in the department that they can and cannot do, what legally cops are allowed to do, but what they don't do, what legally they're not allowed to do, but they try to skirt. You get all that. So now when I become a defense attorney and I read an A form, I've read at least 3 times as many as Michael did just because I was a state attorney. I read these things and halfway through, I'm like, oh, that's bullshit. Oh, he's lying there. Oh, yeah, okay. When I take his depo, I'm going to have to ask him something about this because I know he's full of shit. There's no way he could have done that because I know they're not allowed. Stuff like that. And so the special unit prosecutors are closer to what a defense attorney does because we also have to be creative, right? Especially when you're in a special unit, you go after the real bad guys. You go after guys who probably have priors, guys that have been in the system, so they know how to beat the system, right? The cops that make probable cause arrests are usually dealing with people that are not criminal masterminds. And I use that term loosely.
What Ed's giving you is
we deal with those, and we got to be creative to catch them.
Ed's giving you the idea of specialty prosecutors, but most prosecutors are not specialty prosecutors. Probably 75% of them are just pit prosecutors. And so again, and I don't take anything away from them either, because I don't care if you're a prosecutor or defense attorney, trying cases is tough. Bench trials are tough. Yeah. Don't think that they're not. Actually, when I was a young lawyer and I was doing traffic trials, even in their infractions, I mean, nobody was going to jail. But you know what? You had to be on top of your stuff. You had to know the rules. You had to know the law. You had to know the procedure. You really had, it's like a learning curve. They don't teach you any of that in law school. You're not getting that in law school. There's no law school course. And they should have a class on how to be a litigator for people who want to be litigators. They do. It's called an internship. Well,
they have the lit skills class, but it's still similar. And before we move on, I want to say something because I don't want any prosecutors out there that are listening to me think I belittle pit prosecutors. I'm being 100% honest. I mean this totally, completely 100% honest. This is the best way I describe it. A pit prosecutor, which is how we all start. I was one of them. We all start there. You are a triage doctor in not even Vietnam. You're a triage doctor in the Civil War. Yeah. You got bodies all over the place, bleeding out, meaning your cases, and you have limited resources because
no tools.
You got no tools. And everybody wants you to save their life. It's difficult. A special unit prosecutor is like a surgeon. They give you all the tools you need, but they tell you diagnose, get in there, perform the operation, and be successful. So there's a different kind of pressure, but you do get the tools, and you're respected much like a surgeon would be respected in the medical profession. Everybody knows you're a special prosecutor. They know you have to do certain things, and it's a very specialized thing that you're doing. You're like a surgeon. Now the other guys, no disrespect. Very difficult, very stressful.
You generally need to stick around the office for a while nowadays to get into a specialty unit. And most people don't stick around more than their 3-year commitment because they want to move on with their lives. They've had enough. Most, not all. Some people become career prosecutors, and some decide to stick around longer so that they can get that specialty experience. Like I said, I don't really care which path you take. If you want to explore criminal work, pick one or the other, whether it's the PD's office or the state attorney's office. Don't make a particle of difference because you're still going to get courtroom experience. Where it will make a difference is this. If you think you want to be a defense attorney, there's a definite advantage to doing a CLI with the state because you learn that side of the coin. But I'll tell you what you will never do as a CLI with the state. You will never step foot in a jail. You will never interview a client. You will never get to try and figure out the defense strategy of a case and how to piece together things like mitigation. That you will be doing from day one as an intern with the public defender's office. So it is, I think, to some degree, it's a little more hands-on. But I got to tell you, my 3 months that I spent with the state, my experience was I was absolutely inundated with work. I had more work than I had in any law school class or semester up to that point. And it was real pressure. It wasn't, I guess the hardest part for me in law school was focusing and taking the time to do the law school work, right?
Yeah.
It was hard to sit and do it. You don't want, who the hell wants to deal with cases from 1883? It's a nightmare. We would be reading cases from the King's Court of Chancery in Old England, and so you're scratching your head trying to figure out the language, much less the message. Whereas when you do the internship, you're neck deep in the real world, not the fake world. Let me give you an opportunity to throw anything out there that you'd like, Osky.
Yeah, so I guess going off that and also kind of referencing his Ed's football analogy, like the rules of the game kind of thing. I'm kind of curious, like, and with your tattoos and everything that are beautiful and colorful.
Thank you.
Like, what kind of person becomes a criminal lawyer or a criminal defense attorney? Or do you think like that type of personality is more so just drawn to that area of law because that, like you said, like you're going to the jail, you're interviewing a client, like, and even per our conversation yesterday, like I'm just like anyone else. Like I'm not any better than anyone. No one's better than me. Like I kind of share that same sentiment when I'm out and about, like whether it's a cashier or whoever it is. Like, so do you think like we're just more empathetic than the average like law student or lawyer? Or is it just kind of like...
Can I take this one, Michael? You mind if I take it? I don't think criminal defense attorneys or even prosecutors are any more sympathetic than anybody else. You'd be surprised. Michael will tell you there's a lot of sympathetic prosecutors. I met Michael as a prosecutor. I think the big difference between the defense attorneys or the criminal attorneys, be it prosecutor or defense, that are successful, because there's a lot of different reasons that motivate people. But let's focus on the successful ones. The successful ones are the ones that crave that pressure, that adrenaline rush, that excitement. It's exciting. It's exciting to walk into a courtroom. It's exciting to have these arguments where people's lives hang in the balance. When you do civil, it's money. When you do family, I know it's important. When you're getting divorced, it could be very traumatic and very stressful. But at the end of the day, everybody's living in a home. Everybody's arguing about money, time sharing, seeing their kid, child support. Here, like I said, this is the show. This is somebody who's going to prison, somebody who's going to be taken away from their family. So even if you have a dirtbag criminal that is a career criminal, and yes, we can probably unanimously agree that he belongs in prison, as a prosecutor and certainly as a defense attorney, because Michael meets these people, but even as a prosecutor, if you are really ethical and you're doing this for the right reason, which a prosecutor's job is justice, not prosecution, justice. It weighs on you when you've got a guy who's got a great kid who's 13 or 14 years old and he's a scholar, he's going to get a scholarship and he's a really good kid. And the guy's wife is a great person and his mother, he's just a dumb shit black sheep of the family. And you struggle with, how do I take this guy away from his little 13-year-old daughter? How do I do this? but I've got the entire community to worry about. So I think we're all as sympathetic. I think it really boils down to that rush, and not everybody can handle the pressure. You've been there. It's a rush, but you throw a fucking interception with the game on the line.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pressure, bro. So
on both sides.
you got to be able to
Yeah.
take it in and love it.
As an antidote
Right?
to that, I would say
That's
that when I was starting out my career, I graduated law school and got my license and hung my shingle as a defense attorney day one, and it was very difficult to get clients because I was green as a Granny
Crazy.
Smith apple. And people
So
don't
much
want to
respect.
hire you to when their liberty is at stake and you have no real world experience. And I shacked up with some experienced attorneys, and they taught me along the way, but I was working on their cases for free because I couldn't get cases of my own. So my strategy to develop litigation skills, apart from second chairing anybody that would allow me and sitting in on anything that I could, was hanging around the courthouse. At that time, obviously pre-COVID, pre-smart technology, it was a very different world. And people used to hang around the coffee shop in the courthouse, and about an hour before court started, it was the social hour. Prosecutors, judges, defense attorneys, bondsmen, corrections officers, cops, it was just a fraternity. There was no infighting in the pickle barrel at the courthouse. That was a neutral zone where everybody was just hanging out and doing their thing and enjoying themselves. So what I did was I started meeting as many cops and corrections officers as I could, and I offered to do family law work for them for $25 an hour. Didn't care what it was: child custody, child support, arrearages, breaking quadros, whatever it was. I mean, now you think about it, because these guys are underpaid and they couldn't afford to pay $250, $300 an hour lawyers at that time. So they had a young attorney who was offering to do work for free. I was basically for free. I was hungry, and that kept me in the courtroom. So at least if I wasn't in criminal, I was in family. I was still in front of a judge. I was still making argument. I was still learning how to interact with clients and honing my negotiation skills, etc. Jumping backwards from that, when I was in law school, I thought that the lowest, dirtiest, filthiest, most disgusting thing that you could do with a law degree was criminal defense. Then I discovered family law, which set a whole new level of low. So I think, as Ed says, it's a comfort zone thing. Where you feel comfortable is where you fall, but you may not know unless you dip your foot into a couple different pools and figure out which one works for you. I have friends who are family lawyers that are very successful and very good at what they do. Me, I couldn't take that stuff home at night and go to bed. It stayed with me. Criminal doesn't, but family did. So everybody's unique. When you ask about tattoos, listen, I've always been of the opinion, what anybody does in their off time should be their business, unless and until it affects their job. So, I mean, like, if you want to go home and speedball, you know what speedballing is? If you want to go home and speedball, so be it. That's your prerogative. Just don't do it in front of my children, and make sure you're at work in the morning clear-headed, right? But when it affects your work, it becomes... What? What were you going to say, Martinez? What kind of snappy...
I don't know if it's you guys that are breaking up or me. I don't know if it's my internet or yours, but you're breaking up. But I said, tattoos, nobody cares. I got tattoos. I got earrings. Nobody cares. So, it's a different era. Of course, there's some people that are still hanging around that remember. I don't know.
Well, let me cut you off for a second there.
But pretty much everybody else has already been around long enough that they understand tattoos. Nobody cares about tattoos. Nobody cares about the earrings. Nobody cares about your lifestyle. Nobody cares,
Here's the other thing, Osky. You will learn, if you haven't already, that planning is important. So if you'll notice, for example, see my arm here?
Got the shark.
Now, when I'm dressed for court and I'm wearing a long sleeve shirt, you don't see any of that. It's completely hidden. So, look, I don't go to court wearing short sleeve shirts. That's the bottom line.
If I may, I don't think anybody cares. I really don't think anybody cares.
I don't agree with that. I think people do care, and I think people do. There are people out there who have preformed opinions. You know, if I had teardrop tattoos on my face, believe me, people would notice. You know, I think that there are things that you can get away with, and there are things that you just be practical about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, look, I'll tell you, I did a post the other day where I talked about the differences, some of the differences between Broward and Dade criminal court. And it's amazing because all you have to do is cross 215th Street and you're in two totally different criminal justice worlds. They don't even resemble one another. So one of the things that Broward has, they've had it since before I was a lawyer, it's a thing called summer rules. Summer rules mean that during the summer months, it is a formal administrative rule in the Broward County court system that you do not need to wear a suit and you do not need to wear a tie. Lawyers are allowed to show up in court wearing jeans, a shirt, and a sport coat. You can't come in flip-flops and a crop top, but you are allowed to, down dress. It's respectful to the court still, with your sport coat. You're not going to wear, skull T-shirts or anything, but you can go in with a plain T-shirt or a button-down or a polo and a sport coat. That rule does not apply in Dade County. It has never applied in Dade County. That's not to say that some lawyers don't do it. But go ahead, Ed.
No, I said you're right. You're right. You're absolutely right. It's not a rule.
So there
are some counties, sure. But Michael, there are some counties that I go to, and the first thing they see when they call my name, because they don't know what I look like, I'll go to here in
Martinez.
Florida, upstate.
They hear you're Cuban.
That's it. The first they go, so it's, yes, Your Honor, and they feel, oh, counsel, step right up. Yes, good to see you. Yes, Your Honor, Ed Martinez representing so and so. That's it. Immediately the attitude changes. Immediately they're giving me shit. But honestly, how often has it happened in the 20 years I've been practicing? Maybe 3 times. There was one here in Dade County who did it to me. So
one of my first cases was in St. Lucie County, which is, just up the East Coast, about 2 hours. And I show up in court with my client. He, it was a Dade County resident who had gotten arrested in St. Lucie County. So we show up in court. Judge calls the case. I walk up, introduce myself, Mike Haber on behalf of the defendant. Judge smiles and he goes, "You must be the boys from Dade County." So, again, we were stereotyped, had nothing to do with tattoos. It had to do with location. But yeah, so I think that there are certain, perceptions that people have. But again, this goes back to what we first talked about. Your job as a litigator is to change perceptions, to mold perceptions to fit your narrative, right? And that may include the way that the judge looks at you, but more often it certainly includes the way the judge looks at your client, right? And the prosecutor and the jury, more importantly, because look, Ed will tell you, most prosecutors who have been on the job for a while and judges, they have really seen and heard pretty much everything like we have. We're not going to bullshit a bullshitter. That's the bottom line. But a jury is not generally as savvy as those judges or lawyers. So they are more malleable. Now, which way they're going to go, who's going to be more successful, that's up in the air in any given case. But trying to persuade a jury is a very different skill set than trying to persuade a prosecutor or a judge.
I will share one thing that I think does fit, and actually somebody else told me this, and I think they're absolutely correct. If you notice, most of the things we do in our life comes with uniforms. And I don't mean just sports, but let's look again at the sports analogy. You go to a tryout and some guy shows up looking like he's never played football in his life, right? Comes wearing a basketball jersey and I don't know, some shorts and flip-flops, and he's sitting down at a table. Now, not performance-wise, but notice a lot of the things that we do, very rarely are we in a trial. So you're going to show up to open court and step up to the podium. So can you imagine some guy comes to a trial dress like that and he's trying to convince the coach that's going to be drafting the players, trust me, I can play. There's a uniform. That's much more important, is to look the part of the lawyer takes you a very long way until you establish a reputation. Now, once you establish a reputation, it's a little different, but you still, believe it or not, I mean, think about your own life. When you were playing, once you were the starter, you still had to kind of wear the uniform, right? You had to wear the right cleats, and you had to know how to wear the wristbands and the shirt that you had to wear, and all these things are part that we just take for granted. But there's a uniform for everything in life, and there's a uniform for being a lawyer, just like there's a uniform for being a barista at Starbucks. Everything has a uniform that fits.
There's another overriding.
That's more I think of.
There's another overriding. No, go ahead, Osky.
I guess that's kind of what I wanted to get at. Like what does a lawyer look like today? You know, like
anything.
You just mean just put the suit on and you're good. Like whatever your outfit is.
It's obviously you want to dress the part, but it's much more important how you present verbally and intellectually is much more important, because at the end of the day, you could put a monkey in a suit, but if the monkey doesn't know the rules of evidence and the rules of procedure and doesn't understand these skills and the arts of cross-examination and, persuasion, that monkey ain't going to do you any good. No matter, he could be dressed in Versace and Ferragamo, it ain't going to help.
I'll give you a perfect football analogy. When Tom Brady got drafted by the New England Patriots, story is that the owner at the time was Robert Kraft, came up to him in the first, one of the first practices, and said, "Hey, I'm counting on you to something to do great things or be a big thing." And apparently Tom Brady said, "Oh, you made the best decision of your life. I'm going to be the starting quarterback here," or something along those lines. Now, again, back then, he was nobody. So I'm sure Robert Kraft was like,
news to Drew Bledsoe.
Sure, kid. Sure. So he had to dress the part. He had to look the part. He had to make sure he went to practice and he was there early. And he had to make sure he did everything. And he studied. And when he went out on the field, he was looking right and he looked like he knew what he was doing. But today, Tom Brady can walk in and be like, "Don't worry, guy. I got this. I'm going to go take a vacation for a weekend."
But guess what, Ed? He doesn't. What does he do instead? He preps and he works harder now than he ever did as a rookie.
I'm saying his look. He could come in at the first meeting with the head coach in flip-flops and a T-shirt, and it doesn't matter because he established a reputation.
Osky, that's the bottom line.
Well, hold on. Let me get there. Stop it. I agree with you. My point is he could, but he still doesn't. I still go to court respectfully. And I'm one of those guys that sometimes doesn't wear a tie because I've been playing this game long enough to know when the judge is okay with me not wearing one, depending on what's on calendar, what I got to do that day. And when the judge is like, "Okay, I expect you to respect the institution," right? Tom Brady's not going to go out and play a game on national television looking like a buffoon, but he might show up to a meeting on a Sunday in flip-flops. So, but that's only because of his reputation. When he first started, he wouldn't show up like that. So what I'm trying to tell you is more than your tats and more than my earrings and things like that, the uniform and your respect for the profession, especially when you first start, I think is much more important because it establishes your reputation. You respect the profession, you respect what we're doing, which is justice, and you know enough to respect that we expect you to dress a certain way and you're going to wear the right uniform. Now, once everybody gets to know you, like right now at this point, most of the people on the bench actually practice with Michael and I. Right? So we've been drinking with them, we've been partying with them, we went to law school with them, but we still show them that we respect that now you are no longer my buddy, even though you kind of are, but when you're sitting up there with a robe, I respect you because you're a judge. So it's the uniform. That's really the more important thing, I think.
So to kind of
any questions?
Go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Kind of pivot off of that. Would you say the drinking, the camaraderie, and even just the respect for the profession, does that stem from I'm so far looking at law school as a hazing experience? That's kind of my view. It's just emotionally draining, mentally draining, psychologically draining, physically draining in terms of the effect of the emotional draining, not making you take care of basic needs sometimes, where school is the number one thing. So is that do you think that's ever going to change? Because I feel with Zoom, it's gotten 10 times worse, because at least during my first semester, I had everyone was feeling the same way because it was new for everyone. So we at least made more of an effort to connect with people and go out and make friends. But now I
can't even imagine what it's like having to do this remotely. But I would say to you, look, you're in for, it gets better each year because you start to be able to take electives. And, your first year is always the worst year because everything's regulated. You're required to take every class that you're in.
That's right, Mike. You broke up. Okay, good.
I don't know. I've kind of had like, I was expecting that to be the case. And like, I almost found like my first year, I performed better because like there was just more, I don't even know if there was more structure, but it's just more like, oh, this is new. I need to like really focus. And like,
Well,
after,
that's probably what it is.
after I kind of learned the rules of the game, like
you start
I
to acclimate.
if I have a subscription to Quimby or like, which like you
Brother,
just, it just gives you the case brief. So why do I have to read it if I already can have it right in front of me? So
see, when we went to law school, there was nothing like that. It didn't exist.
Law school is no different than your freshman year playing on that football team, brother. No different. Coach wants to make sure you're mentally tough and it's important because what happens when you're getting your ass kicked? You get sacked 9 times, 10 times in a freaking game. You can't even breathe when they snap you the ball 2 seconds. You can't even do a 2-step drop before there's guys hanging all over you. The coach needs to make sure that by the time you're ready to start, you're not going to fall apart. You're not going to start yelling at your offensive lineman. You're not going to lose your cool. You're not going to be an asshole. He needs to know that you are emotionally, mentally strong enough to handle it. And I learned that halfway through actually almost towards the end of my first year of law school. I told you, law school is simply an emotional beating. You got to make sure you can take it. Because when you're standing in front of a judge, that's it. What's your last name again? I'm sorry. What's your last name?
Serbin.
Serbin. So when you're standing in front of a judge and you've studied for 2 weeks and you got everything and you know your case law and you got everything and you make your argument and the judge looks at you and goes, Mr. Serbin, are you seriously trying to tell me? And you're like, oh, shit. I thought I had this down pat. And now he's yelling at me. How dare you? Oh, shit. You can't buckle like Wallflower. You got to stand there and be respectful, but you got to stand there and take it. And then you got to fight back respectfully, make your cogent arguments, and not back down. They got to make sure you can do that.
Preserve your record.
If nothing else, preserve your record. So if the judge is wrong, you can appeal him, and about a year later, you can say, told you so. When he's yelling at you, you don't disrespect him. You just let the third DCA say, actually, you were wrong, and the lawyer was right.
Osky, you got any other questions you want to throw out here in the last couple of moments?
I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the mental health kind of stuff. So if you have
I'm really sorry we didn't spend time on that. Please.
Well, we got 3 minutes, and let's do it because I'm big on mental health. Big.
Yeah, well,
yeah, so
just because you're a mental case doesn't mean you're big on mental health.
No, I'm just kind of interested because like this club that you mentioned in the intro, like that I joined, like that's new for the law school. And I remember from like our orientation, even like they made it a big point to have a whole like conference on, you know, lawyers are more likely to become alcoholics and have depression and have all these different conditions or whatever. So, but other than that, I have, and like occasional, like, oh, finals just ended, like grades like might be important to you now, but they don't really matter. Like those types of messages. Like other than that, there hasn't really been any, like, I don't really know what the school could do or like anything else to help with mental health, considering that the classes are on Zoom also. So
you may want to consider seeing if the state attorney's office will take you as a CLI now. And I'll tell you why. Bear with me. Judge Leifman, which is the judge in Dade County right now, a couple of years back, along with the state attorney's office, started a huge mental health program. It's called JDP, and it's for mental health. It's for defendants that keep getting rearrested, but it's not because they're bad people. It's because they have severe mental health issues, and sometimes it's as simple as multiple domestic violences. Right? It could be that person is bipolar and doesn't even know they're bipolar. So it's an amazing program. It's actually how I met my wife. I was a prosecutor. She was the prosecutor of mental health. And I had a client that I defend. Now, we didn't do anything until the case was over. We never even flirted. But I met her because I was there.
Want to buy a bridge, Osky?
Yeah.
No, I swear. I swear to God, you could pull our phone records. So it's and I've always been big on mental health issues. And this is really you can pull them. If you want. So here's the part of the mental health that's important, I think. If we started opening criminal, we could start opening those eventually later for family. I'm sure there's a lot of issues in those family courts with these divorces. I've seen them when I represent them, that the root of the problem was mental health. Same with the criminal. Yes, he robbed a liquor store, or yes, he beat his wife. But the root of the problem started from the mental health, that they were not even aware that they had mental health issues. And so it's a really wonderful program that Kathy has done. It's one of the really, she's done a lot, but that's one really great program. But it was in conjunction with the Dade County Courthouse. And then I would suggest you take a second CLE if they want you to do the criminal trial practice of it. And I think prosecutors would be much better off understanding mental health issues, because then they can get their cases and they can see this might be a good candidate to help them become productive members of society, as opposed to just sticking them in jail and letting them just rotate like a turnstile in and out. So
let me wrap this up because we're at the timeline here, but let me wrap this up by saying I wish that we had spent more time talking about mental health. I would like to learn more about your program, and I think we have a great deal to talk about on that subject. So I'm going to invite you to come back, and I'd like to bring on a mental health expert as well, and we could do a panel with 4 of us where we dedicate the entire show to mental health issues, both in school, in the profession, and just in general. Because I think it's an exceptionally important topic that affects anybody. I don't care what kind of job you do or where you do it, or if you don't even have a job, it doesn't matter. Mental health is our probably one of our biggest challenges in society today. Anyhow, that said, we got to wrap it up because we're over time. And I want to thank you.
Wait, I'm going to ask.
Go ahead, Ed.
I'm going to ask you one thing, Michael. Michael, I want to ask you one thing before we go. I'd like to get him back for another reason, and maybe about 30 days or a little more. Now that I'm confirming, and Michael and I have confirmed for you, that in our opinion, law school is really more about surviving an emotional beating. Now that you know what the belly of the beast, you know what they're up to. I want to see when you come back if it's helped you with your stress level. Knowing, think about this. When you're prepping your cases and briefing them, whatever you're doing, and you're going to class tomorrow, as you're doing it, realize no matter what I do, this professor's probably going to bust my balls. He's probably going to make me think that I have no fucking idea what I'm talking about. I'm clueless and I'm an idiot. So it doesn't really matter. And then when he picks on you and he does it, hopefully you'll be like, yeah. All right. Here's the emotion. Here's the hazing. All right. I got to take it.
That was kind of my mindset going into this semester, because I've had some classes where I studied like the night before the final, like panicking, like feel terrible about it. And then I end up with an A somehow. And then I've had other classes where I'm like, oh, I got this. Like, I know everything about criminal procedure, boom, boom. And then I'll get like a B back. Like, so regardless, you're just like, all right, the grades are unpredictable a lot of the time. So like, just do your best kind of thing.
Unpredictable.
Just pass.
Well, if you'll join us, we'll be happy to have you back.
If you're good enough to be.
He's all choppy.
All right. We're going to let Martinez and his chop.
That would be great. Yeah.
Okay, I don't know. Lost you guys, or you guys lost me. I see nobody else. Myself.
All right.
All right, you're back.
Thank you very much for coming on today. Osky, I appreciate your coming on today. Martinez, not so much, but listen, we got to do what we got to do. We will definitely schedule a follow-up, and I'm going to see about bringing in. I'm going to see about bringing in somebody else so that we could spend some more time talking about mental health. But definitely keep a mental log, as Ed suggested, because we'll be curious to see if your outlook changes after this discussion. Excellent. All right. That said, I want to thank everybody for paying attention. Osky, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We really appreciate your time. We appreciate your insight. We appreciate your energy, and we wish you all the best. We look forward to chatting with you soon. And as for the audience, we look forward to seeing you next week on episode 29, where Martinez and I will again attempt to be at your service. Thanks, guys. Have a great rest of the week.